Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, wherever you're coming from today. We appreciate everyone being on today's webinar session. We're going to get started here in just a moment, but before we do, I'd like to go through a few housekeeping items just to keep us on task. So first thing, we are recording this session and we will be taking questions throughout. So if you have not attended one of our webinars before, you want to take a moment to locate the questions pane in the Go to Webinar side panel. This is where we will be monitoring those questions and trying to answer them as we go along, and then we'll also have some time for questions at the end. So again, thanks for joining us. I'm so glad that you're here. Today, we're going to be focusing on the new ZynBit 2020 dashboard. So as many of you know, we recently published out back in the early summer a new ZynBit 2020 sidebar, and now we are bringing forth our new ZynBit 2020 dashboard. So very excited to walk all of you through this today. A lot of great admin tools in the new dashboard. So with that, let's talk a little bit about some of the highlights that you'll expect to see in today's preview webinar. First things first, we really want to put you as the admin in the driver's seat, allowing you to automate that process of user management, being able to deploy users to the sidebar, and also control features across the teams. And we'll talk a little bit about what that looks like. We also want to give you full control of your data. We know that every Salesforce instance is unique. There are custom objects, different page layouts, different record types that every organization is taking advantage of and using in their own way. And we want to make sure that we're giving you as many options to take control of the data and the flow that needs to happen into Salesforce as it relates to things like enabling and disenabling email attachment filing, or if you do or do not have enhanced email turned on for your organization. And then we also want to make it super easy and ready for the enterprise, looking at things like how we can manage your organization's authentication settings, single sign-on, login options, app connectors, and also utilizing certain features like our calendar sharing API moving forward. So we'll talk about the dashboard and where some of those things live. So here is a quick introduction of what you'll see in the demo today for the ZynBit 2020 dashboard. What you're looking at here is our calendar sharing usage analytics page, and we'll dive into this and take a look at this live when we move to the demo portion of today's presentation. But just wanted to give you a glimpse into what we'll be exploring today and how these tools can be utilized by our admins to really drive adoption of the application as well as Salesforce, and also help you just understand overall where do your users fit in terms of their usage of functionality within ZynBit. Are they using it the way that it was intended? And how can we help you to make sure that those users are taking full advantage of the application? Another way that we can put you in the driver's seat is by enabling you to choose if you want to deploy certain ZynBit features to your user base. So what this means is that there will now be opportunities with current functionality as well as any future functionality that we add to the sidebar or the dashboard to be able to decide whether or not that's something that you're ready to deploy in your organization. As you see here on the screen example, one example of that might be, do we want to require emails to be saved with attachments? In some circumstances, organizations are required to keep a lot of that correspondence, particularly in a high compliant organization. In others, they want the opposite effect. They don't want those attachments going into Salesforce. So this is a great example of how we're really putting you in the driver's seat to decide what's the best fit for you. All right, so let's take a look. Give me just a minute here. We're going to transition over to our screen. So the very first step that we want to take here is, how do we get to the new ZynBit dashboard? So we're going to put in dashboard, and it will be dashboard.ZynBit.com. So for any of you who are familiar with app.ZynBit, we're now moving this URL to dashboard.ZynBit, but don't worry, if you go to app.ZynBit, we'll get you there too. So here we're going to come to the new 2020 dashboard. This presents me with a home page if I am a user. So you'll see here in the top right-hand corner, I'm actually logged in currently as a user, and I'm presented with the downloads for deploying the sidebar to my inbox, as well as configuring any necessary features. But for today's demo, we're going to look at this from the view of the admin. So as I select admin, you'll see here that the menu options have changed. I have more options that are focused around deploying functionality or implementation of certain things like authentication to all of the users. So also we have our hamburger menu here. If you select this, it opens up a sidebar menu that just gives you some easier navigation to the same thing that you're seeing here on the home page. So let's start out looking at my organization. So within my organization, I can do things like edit my profile. And you'll see here it also displays for me who is the primary admin on the account. If we have secondary admins or multiple individuals that are set as admin, there may be circumstances where the primary admin needs to be identified, and then also through here can actually be emailed if you need to contact them. It also presents you with the current subscription plan that you're on and when that renewal is coming up, as well as the ability to set password resets for your users. So do you want those users to have to reset 30, 90, 180 days? You can choose. And then it also displays the current user count. Updates to images can be made, updates to this information can be made as well. We're going to go back here to our sidebar menu, and we're going to look at this for features as well. So we'll take a look at this across a number of different feature sets within ZynBit, but just at a high level, you'll see this is one example where you can come in and say, I want these features enabled for all of my users, whether it be calendar sync, task sync, and email sync to Salesforce, as well as things like web visitor tracking. So for those that have utilized web visitor tracking, you'll see that there's a snippet here that we can actually put onto our website. If you're not using that today, this is a simple way to actually send the tracking code to your webmaster, have them add it to your site so that you can begin tracking those website visits through the sidebar and see them for each of your contacts and prospects. And then we have authentication. So as I mentioned earlier, things like single sign-on, app connectors, as well as service accounts. So if we take single sign-on as an example, you'll see here that we have our Salesforce single sign-on enabled, which means that when our users have to log in to the sidebar, they're able to do so through their Salesforce credentials. Very helpful. And then also in circumstances where you're using a custom URL to log in or you have a community URL login, you can set these for the users as well so that those present themselves to the user upon login. So we've looked at a number of the organizational settings within the 2020 dashboard. Now let's talk about managing users. On the Manage Users page, you'll see a total list of all of the users that are currently set up. You'll see here that there's 140 listed, and we have 130 in our plan. So some of those have been reallocated to other users. We can also look at specifics around the users based upon their user profiles. And then we can determine based upon this tooltip which users are currently assigned as admins. And that's also reflective over here in the role column. You can also decide how you want to see this page. So if there are current columns that you want to display and others that you don't, you can choose. And then we can also from here create new users. There are two ways that we can create a user. We can create a single user or we can do a Salesforce import. You can also select all, one, or multiple contacts in which you want to perform an action on. This will open up our bulk action sidebar in the dashboard and then allow us to pick an action. For example, here we could export these users out. So moving on from managing users, let's talk about Salesforce Sync. There are 3 record types that we currently sync today between Salesforce and the inbox. That's calendar, email, and task. All 3 of these screens have a very similar look and feel as well as functionality to them. So for the purpose of today's demo, we're going to take a look at the calendar sync. You'll see here this looks totally different from anything you've seen in the ZynBit sidebar or dashboard before. Now we're bringing forth user analytics to you so that you can actually see how users are interacting with this functionality, how many are active, how many maybe are inactive, and then be able to take action on that. So here we have this easy to read donut chart that allows us to see, do we have non-adopters, do we have active users, and do we have inactive? In the case of the inactive, there could be a scenario where the user was active at some point, but maybe their calendar got disconnected and it needs to be reconnected. So being able to identify this is very helpful so that you can make sure that the users are taking full advantage. So one thing I may do here on the screen is actually select the inactive in the donut chart, and you'll see that it actually filters the users listed below. So this would show me anyone that currently has a calendar sync status that is inactive. And I can from here actually turn it back on behalf of the user, or I can contact the user so that they can take the right and appropriate action. The other thing I can do here that's very helpful is that I can export these reports out. So there may be a number of filters that I want to apply before I export. Let's say, for example, we want to instead look at calendar sync successes over time. So here we can select our calendar and we can actually navigate to a particular date range that we're looking to report on. So here we could select July and then also select today. And you'll see that it filters the report out to show me just the ones that are inactive between those 2 dates. Then I can easily export this to a CSV. You'll see it drops right into my downloads in the tray. And then I have these reports where I can really dig deep into what's happening in terms of the usage. Going back to our time-based chart here, we can look at the time-based from a month period, 3 months, 6 months, and a year. We can look at where there were potentially failed sync efforts. So being aware of those, you can look at the information that's there in terms of there was 30 failed calendar syncs in the month of July. And then here, most importantly, we can see the successes. How many calendar events successfully got into Salesforce? In this case, 345 calendar events synced to Salesforce within the month of July amongst my user base. So as you can see here, all of these Salesforce Sync usage analytics screens give you a lot of insight into how your users are utilizing those tools today and the records that are going into Salesforce. So we're going to move on to the sidebar. The sidebar has a general and a Salesforce integration. We're going to choose Salesforce integration just to show you some more specifics about how this can be used. So here in the Salesforce integration, you can look at settings for search and related list, email, attachments, and the calendar. You'll see here for the search and related list, as we discussed earlier, every Salesforce instance is going to be different record types being used. For example, at ZynBit, we don't use lead records, we only use contacts. So in those certain circumstances, you may want to come in here as an admin and actually decide what are the things that we want to display out to our users within the sidebar. And I can also set this to allow a user to modify. What this means is that in any situation where you see this in the dashboard, that indicates that we are allowing an individual user through the inbox sidebar to change this. So if they wanted to have search name fields only enabled, they would be able to choose that on their own. If you deselect that, then the user can't modify at the user level. And then here we can set our related list displays, any search result object lists we want to show up for the users, work tab, as well as object list and topics. So that gives you some example here of some of the things that you can deploy, enable, and disable to the users. So similar to what we see in search and related list, we have similar options for attachments. So if attachments is something that's important to you and you want to make sure that those are getting into Salesforce, not only do you have the option to make sure that those are forced or saved, you can also decide where should they go. So if you have different attachment repositories, whether it be filing that attachment to the parent object, maybe you want to file it to the task object, or filing new attachments for synced events, you have the opportunity to enable or disable these as necessary. The next place that we will go is calendar scheduling. The calendar scheduling is actually currently, the setup is not built into the new dashboard. However, if you select this, it is going to bring you out to a usage page similar to what we saw with the sync. So if you're trying to establish settings for the user, this will actually open up in a new tab. This is going to display the 2018 ZynBit dashboard and enable you as an admin to do things like setting up calendar meeting types on behalf of the users. So if you have a sales process in place where certain meetings need to happen in that sales process, you can enforce the meeting types so that those are the meeting types that show up for the users to utilize. And so while that's displaying here, we will look at the calendar usage analytics. So here, similar to what we saw with the sync, we have the ability to see how many users are active or inactive on this calendar usage, and then also our time-based view. So because we are in a test environment here, we're seeing that there's no calendar setup. But in the event that there was, you would see your list of users here, the calendar that they have set up along with the path. So should we want to know the link to that, and when those meetings have been used or booked. And also this, of course, can get exported and you can choose your display options. So going back here to our ZynBit 2018 dashboard, this is where we have all of our calendar settings. This is where you can set all the organizational calendar settings. Here are our meeting types, which we discussed in terms of being able to set up specific meeting types that you want to push to the team. The users that are currently enabled on calendar sharing, and then also our branding. So depending on the subscription that you're in this case, I'm not in a subscription that allows me to do this, I have the option to change the background watermark image as well as the logo image. So it's a great tool for when your customers are coming to those personalized calendar scheduling pages and they're seeing your information there. They know they're in the right place. Okay, so that is a quick demo of the 2020 dashboard, and at this time, we'd love to have you chat in your questions. Great question. So we did get a question here, and the question is timeline for general availability. So glad you asked that question. This will go live to our customers and users. The planned date is for August 31st. It will be late in the day, so most users will not see it, or admins will not see it until Tuesday, the 1st of September. Keep the questions coming, we love them. Okay, so we've got another question here, and the question is, can we actually take the meeting types and create a whole bunch of them and actually deploy them out to certain sets of users? Yes, absolutely. You can take those meeting types, create them, and then you can select the users that you want to apply that to. Another great question we're getting here is, is this new dashboard just for admins? Is it going to replace the app.zynbit.com for all users? Yes, so the answer to that is yes. So this is the new dashboard. It will be available for both users and admins. Although I will say that a lot of the setup and functionality at the user level has actually been built into the inbox sidebar. So we certainly encourage users to set up things within the sidebar. So example of that would be calendar sharing. They can actually set up meeting types. They can adjust their settings in terms of business hours and location right from the sidebar. So there's not a lot that the user can't do in the sidebar today that would require them to come to the dashboard, with the exception of possibly downloading the application to their inbox. But yes, it will replace the existing dashboard. Getting a question here to actually show some of this. So in terms of the old dashboard of the app.zen, if we go back to my screen here, a good example of this, so here you'll see at the top right-hand corner, depending on my role, this is available for both the admin and the user. We were primarily in the admin view, so you can see here we have all of these options available as an admin. If I were to transfer to my user profile, you'll see that the screen looks very different, right? So they would not have all of the options that someone assigned in an admin role would have. However, they could come in and configure some of their features. So for example, if they are able to enable Salesforce Sync on their own, they can navigate from these links here and do so. If we go to the menu on the sidebar, you'll notice that it looks a little different as well. Here on the profile, instead of it being an organizational profile, it's the individual profile. So great question there on the profiles. Certainly happy to show anything else that anybody has any questions about. So we received one question here regarding, are we able to see as an admin any failed event details for users? So on the admin screen, and if we just take sync again as an example, on the usage analytics page that you'll see for this particular sync tool, you'll be able to see the actual events here. So for example, in January 2020, we had a couple of failed events, right? And it doesn't give you specifics on the actual events, although we are planning to hopefully incorporate that in where if you clicked on that, you'd be able to get a report of those specific events. Today, it just gives you the number, but we can help you if you determine that you want to have more details about that. We can connect you with your CSM or our support team, and they'd be glad to get that information for you. Okay, got a few minutes left here. If anybody has any other questions, be glad to take those. Thank you to everyone who did chat in those questions. Appreciate that. All right. Well, I think if we don't have any other questions, we're going to wrap up today's session. Again, this is being recorded, so we'll be glad to send the link out to everyone. And certainly look forward to having each of you navigate into the new dashboard come early next week so that you can test it out for yourself. And we love your feedback and questions. So thank you again for joining, and we hope to see you on a future webinar. Have a great day.